So thanks y'all, everyone, for being here today. In this presentation, I want to have us listen together to the work of some songwriters and composers who have been bearing environmental witness in Louisiana over the past couple of decades. And the purpose of this is to serve some of the goals of this working group, which is to provide a platform for creative work that's already been done, and perhaps even talk to the larger Bayou Cultural Collaborative about leveraging some of their work and maybe using some of their work in its communications to the public about issues that are relevant to the effort, and also to stimulate conversation amongst ourselves as a catalyst for future work that some of us as artists might do, in whether it be visual art or music or poetry or whatever. And also in traditional arts. So I would actually like to continue then with a definition of folklore that some may be very familiar with. Folklore is artistic communication in small groups. Speaking of our tradition bearers, but I want to focus today on the artistic communication side of it, and not so much on what's traditional and what's not, because ultimately the line between traditional and popular culture is pretty blurry, and some artists like Pete Seeger used folk traditions to speak to across groups in a larger society. And I want to focus on his quote here, and especially the idea of good music used right. So I won't have so much to say about good music, although we could talk about that after we listen to the examples. But do want to think for a minute together about what it means to be used right. How to employ art in communication of concerns about the environment and how to save the planet. So to help me think about this, I've been starting to delve into this subfield of musicology called ecomusicology, and just clean up my screen here a little bit. And as you can see, there's been quite a bit written already about contexts from various places, from Brazil to Japan to the Pacific Northwest, where Mark Penalty wrote a book, A Song to Save the Salish Sea, about profiling a number of musicians and groups that use music effectively in the Pacific Northwest, the coast of British Columbia and Washington states. And of these, the artists that he found most effective, he found some things they had in common. They have the ability to attract audiences. They work with environmental movements, so they're not just off doing their own thing, making their recordings and playing gigs, but they're also working with environmental groups on specific projects and protesting specific things and so on. These artists also have staying power. They don't just write one song or one album, but they stay with a particular project or movement for several years or even their entire careers. And part of the reason he also selected these particular artists to focus in his book were that they were associated with efforts that had some demonstrable results, arguably some success, although that's pretty hard to measure. Often when you're trying to move hearts and minds, it's hard to know, to really show any kind of causality there. But I do want to emphasize the part about working with environmental movements. So from the perspective of an individual musician, looking for partners that they can help get the word out. And there's also in the other direction, where an organization could have a message that they want to get out, and they can be looking for artists to partner with. And so I might suggest that the Bayou Culture Collaborative is such a group that could be looking for artists to partner with to help get their message out. And elsewhere in his book, Penalty makes the observation that protest action is not about complex rhetorical messaging. It's more about bold action, ritual acuity, not just talking about textual rhetoric, but more the visceral impact that the arts can have, the emotional impact, creativity, clear messaging. So the rest of this presentation is mostly going to be a series of recordings, clips from recordings that I'm going to play, coupled with text on the screen. So as you listen to the music, please also be looking at the screen to try to absorb some of the information. There's probably too much information, but whatever you can glean is great. And I can also go back to some slides later during the Q&A if you want me to. And I collected these songs for a previous project, not field work, but just in terms of finding recordings that were already out there. And most of these are in response to coastal erosion and or the BP oil spill. I have not, those criteria for success I put in the previous slide, I have not really looked at those, use those as a lens to look at this music, but that could be a future project to go back and try to develop some lessons learned for the future. So here we go. We'll start. This is about 14 minutes worth of music, so fasten your seatbelts.
C'est comme mer d'eau salée. Quand les Acadiens sont arrivés dans la Louisiane, c'était à Porto-Mède qu'on était isolés. Isolés de l'influence des Américains, isolés pour préserver notre langue et notre culture. Après la grande haute de 1927, l'armée a commencé à bâtir les levées. Et toute l'eau douce qui devrait courir au mer, elle court entre les levées jusqu'au golfe du Mexique. Sans le sédiment et la nourriture du fleuve, les méchants commençaient à s'abaisser et à mourir. Combien des années avant notre culture suivra les mers?
The land is leaving, oh yeah now. The land is leaving, oh yeah. And I don't think no, that it's coming back, y'all. I don't think no, that it's coming back, no. So come on down. Oh, living, ladies jumping, y'all. They hooping and rolling when the morning comes. Jumping and shouting, they're having fun now. So come on down, take a look around. What's the matter with the place we live in? Did Mother Nature get it wrong? Rush to Delta in the name of changing, and dig it till it's dead and gone. Well, what you gonna tell the children little spirit. When the heart of the bayou bleeds.
Iniem fidelibus contulisti, novum hunc iniem sanctifica, et concede nobis, ita per festa Pascalia, celestibus desideris inflammari.
And she told me that at 3 o'clock the day before the storm, and she said there was something about that sun they had never seen before. It was red. And 3 o'clock the next morning, there were 1,600 people was drowned.
I think somebody recorded winds up 200 miles per hour.
I think that's Fouchon.
Yeah, Fouchon 200, 210, 215.
Like a frigate bird. They call that the storm bird, you know, because they didn't know. They just said, well, that's a storm bird. It's true. It was so rough out that it couldn't feed, so it come to shore to feed during the hurricane season. We spent the Betsy in the Coast Guard station. You pray a lot. It's bad. You could see buildings passing down the lane at the Coast Guard station. I had a few horses. You see a horse pass, the tide washing it away. I had a police car, brand new unit, under the station. The next day was in a Catholic churchyard. But you'd hear that roaring during the night. And then you'd hear something blow up like a freight train. That was somebody's house gone. But you felt bad about leaving my people, so to speak. They have to leave everything they own down here and leave to save them. So you felt bad about leaving, so you'd stay and try to, if they help them out a little bit, the best way you can, If they had something in the yard that was going to wash away, you might pick it up, throw it in the house. It's people you knew. I mean, they're all local people. She was raised with.
perdu ses amis. Je suis un pélican, un pélican qui a perdu ses amis.
Les hommes disent que les oiseaux se cachent pour mourir, mais ce n'est pas le cas, j'en ai vu pousser leur dernier soupir. Les hommes disent que les oiseaux vont facilement revenir, mais ce n'est pas toujours le cas. Ce matin, j'en ai vu 4 repartir. Allez-vous nous secourir pour plus tard nous faire le même coup? Si nous partons cette fois-ci, nous irons encore jusqu'au bout. Allez-vous nous secourir pensant que nous tendrons l'autre jour? Si nous partons cette fois-ci, l'horizon sera
un pélican, un pélican qui a perdu ses amis.
On the southern shore of Louisiana, now they ain't no more. I'm kicking mud up off a crawfish hole, barefooted with a fishing pole, to make a living with my own 2 hands. And yeah, it's part of being who I am. Gone back into the oil field, that's the only way to pay our bills. But if I'm lucky, I could have a son and take him hunting like his daddy had done. Get him working on a fishing boat up and down the Gulf of Mexico.
Billionaire pirate born on point first pressure. Oh, it ain't my fault. Say, man, who pushed the marshes back? Is where the hurricane shelter in the garden at. Oh, it ain't my fault. Shit, from the Gulf of Mexico to the boat level wall, something gone wrong and it's somebody. Oh, it ain't my fault. Scripture say they go to the rock and hide they face. Say the rock right out, no hiding place. Say they go to the rock and hide they face. Say the rock right out, no hiding place. Say they go to the rock and hide they face. Say the rock right out, no hiding place. Oh Lord, it ain't my fault.
So I didn't have time to play all the songs I found, obviously, and here are some others, including an entire album of songs inspired by Hurricane Katrina called "Feeder Bands on the Run," as well as a hip hop video featuring some New Orleans artists, the "Sorry Ain't Enough No More," and a soundtrack from the Cry You One multimedia live performance thing that Mondo Bizarro and Art Spot Productions did. So I just want to say a couple things, leave you with a couple things before we start this discussion. To take some things from the Bayou Culture Collaborative position statement that I think would be especially fertile ground for artists to consider and respond to, the idea of impacted communities having a voice in how they adapt and relocate, and what that means to them, and what's important as they do that, and also what it means to the receiving communities who may be receiving some folks who need to move away from the coast because of the changing environmental conditions there, and also the idea of sustaining the living cultural traditions that are on the coast now and have been, and how can perhaps some of those traditions themselves address the situation that is currently going on, and it's also assessing historic and archaeological sites. Those sites themselves could be inspiration for future work. And also this direct quote from the position statement that we're to mobilize and support artists and tradition bearers to lead community resilience conversations and communicate the statewide impact of environmental change. So I'll just leave it there. I also have some references if anybody wants to look at those again later, but I'll just stop sharing my screen right now, and so we can have a discussion and take any questions. So, and I'm going to just copy into the chat some links to relevant videos from the stuff that I presented. I referred to some of the videos in the presentation. So I yield the floor to whoever wants to take it next. Thoughts? Jamie, you're muted.
Thank you so much. My first inclination is that this tradition probably goes back a long way, right? Maybe as far as the oil companies themselves and whatnot. Do you know much about that history, or are you just kind of looking at present day examples of like environmental groups, since that's maybe newer than the oil companies?
Yeah, well, I don't know so much about the history. Maida probably knows more about it than I do. Tommy Michaud mentioned a couple of songs that people had written in the past about hurricanes from like the 40s and 50s. Amadea Ardoin had recorded a song that he called La Valse de, something about La Valse de Pellipoteur. I'm not going to say the French word right, but basically the waltz of the oil field worker.
Oh, wow.
Back in the 30s,
Wow. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
so there's probably older strata of traditional culture that may or not have been captured preserved for posterity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of a show a while back that Lost Bayou Ramblers played, and the featured well, they were like, I'm trying to remember if they were, I think they were like playing a score for the I looked it up. The movie is called The Louisiana Story, and it's a
Oh
1948,
yeah. Mhm.
and it's basically like about a Cajun boy, a Cajun family, and like they live in the swamp, like out in the basin or something, and then they encounter the oil workers that are installing a rig. And it's like a black and white film, and really intriguing visuals. But I'm trying to remember what year that was, but it was a very compelling, obviously, mixture of the live music, and the band was, it's intrinsic in them to bring those themes to light. So that was a cool performance and film showing.
Well, that my impression is that that's generally thought of as in support of industry, and I think it was.
Oh yeah, it was
It
totally, it might have been funded by an oil company.
Yeah, it was almost propaganda that
Right.
We're just the next step in the harmony of the marsh.
Yeah, this oil company comes and they tell the family that's living on the bayou or in the swamp what's going on, and they just kind of listen to them, and then the boy sees the drilling going on. He just thinks it's great and it's amazing and awesome, and the oil workers are really nice to him, and
Yeah.
It's like interesting as an audience, because like seeing it so many years later and in a community that's affected by that, I mean, I guess it was meant to be like that juxtaposition. But yeah, seeing it with different eyes, can apply different, you guys see it as for, see through it, I guess.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting too that the Lost Bayou Ramblers were involved with that, because they were involved in the soundtrack of Beasts of the Southern Wild,
Yeah.
which had a very different message, I think,
Oh,
about
yeah.
climate change
They
and
weren't
everything else.
promoting it. I need to ask Louis about that, because I don't have a lot of memory of like what the message, like, I mean, the details of like the title of the performance or anything, but I remember it was, supposed to be some kind of juxtaposition.
I do. There is also some interest among some Cajun musicians who have a strong interest in heritage and the older, in the recordings of the older music, and looking back in the archives for older material and so forth. That part of the interest of that film is the soundtrack. The score was written by a New York-based composer named Virgil Thompson, who was a well-known classical composer and American composer of other work as well. And but some of the material he used as a basis for his composing the score were Louisiana French songs that Irene Whitfield collected in her project for her master's thesis at LSU that she later published. And some of those, I can't remember, some of those were also from field recordings that Lomax did, but Whitfield collected many more songs than just the ones that she worked with Lomax on. So anyway, so
Some kind of like
Thompson takes
imperfect represent or imperfect narration, but still an example or collection of heritage music.
Yeah, right. So that could be one angle too, that they might have interested them, was just the use of traditional material in the soundtrack. So yeah. Other thoughts, questions?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and you reminded me of some things and taught me about some new songs that I wasn't aware of. I'm real curious as about at the very end when you start proposing what could be done with this whole concept. Would you have any more thoughts about what might be done with or without money? You know, because
Right. Yeah. I think with money, one could, or by finding grants for artists, one could commission work that would help to, you know, reach a broader audience for some of the concerns that the collaborative has. For example, if we're about preserving or somehow keeping alive traditions from the coast, what are those traditions, and are some of those folks who are tradition bearers available to work on something or to collaborate with somebody else who would have more time to leverage their work and reach a broader public, to educate the public as to what's going on and what the issues are, or to educate a receiving community about, here's what's going on, to make them more receptive to the folks that are coming, Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of my point of talking about existing work is that there may already be work out there. I'm kind of like blown away by every time I spend much time to look more into this, I find more stuff, more like I was looking more at Cryu one and how many performances they had. And and since I looked into this stuff last time, they've released more videos on YouTube from their archives. I think that maybe that was
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
pandemic project for them to go back into their archives and release some more videos. So there's like a 17-minute documentary that didn't exist on when I last looked. And that was one of the links I just put in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Make sure.
Yeah. So
What I can do is be on the lookout for funding sources, or sometimes, like, we had one donor who just wanted ideas of what they could do, and this had not occurred to, I wasn't aware of it and didn't suggest this.
Or do you have any do you know any tradition bearers that could possibly get involved with something like that?
Well, many that could be interviewed about their thoughts, and, or we could direct the person to previous interviews or something.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, ideally in a commission, you let the artist loose, and you give them some parameters, but
oh yeah,
you don't say do something based on these 10 interviews.
Right.
That you would have to open it up. My fear is that we don't have, we are getting to be more of a platform. We are definitely getting more and more attention. But that really needs to be an artist-driven project. But it maybe the National Endowment for the Arts would be interested in something like this. We'd have to frame it, as not a we'd have to be careful of how we frame it, could go into something like the National Endowment for the Arts. And quite honestly, I don't know the other national funders or larger scale funders to know who might be interested in doing this kind of thing. But maybe the National Wildlife Federation, they're funding us for some things out of the blue, but it's more community engagement activities than a commission. So do you see any other thoughts about what could be done, or anybody, what could we do along these lines?
I mean, just some things that are coming to mind that aren't even necessarily possible, but it just had me dreaming like about, oh, it'd be amazing to have, you know, a artist in residence kind of situation where people could, people who were familiar could take the time and space, or even to have like an immersive experience. Or I mean, obviously artists need time and space to create. So that is a beautiful thing about residencies. They're not very easy to get or work into people's, daily schedules. So that's not necessarily like a practical thing, but just, I was just dreaming of, I guess Studio in the Woods is a situation like that,
Well, again, we can work through we can try to achieve goals, not doing it ourselves, but
right.
And so a studio, that's immediately what I thought of when you said that, is to see if a studio in the woods could garner, because they have the resources to actually do something like that, even a commission,
And their residencies have different themes,
Mhm.
Season to season. So perhaps
They
there could
often
be-
are environmental. Lately, they've been heavily environmental.
Definitely. So maybe that's a conversation or a curiosity, talking with them about, I don't know. I don't know who chooses those themes or what influences that. I'm sure they have like a list ready to go, but I
Where
know
are they located?
What's that?
Where are they located?
They're down like in Belchase, past Belchase.
English turn.
Yeah. English turn.
You go onto the West Bank and you head, it's like the last part of Orleans on the West Bank.
And it really is a beautiful forested area, and like an on-site residency location. And it's connected to Tulane now. And they host like a forestival, which is a big community event with lots of partners and musicians that contribute. And the forestival is all, environmentally minded through the creative lens.
Cool.
Let's see if I can send the link in the chat. I would love to do a residency there one day.
Yeah, they've built up such a reputation and track record that they're attracting national artists. Although they're still good about supporting a lot of Louisiana, they haven't totally gone national, where some organizations end up being biased towards the non-locals.
Right.
Or really done that.
Seems like there's different ways to participate, beyond that, like receiving a residency, but if there was some place like this on Grand Isle or something, that'd be amazing. Obviously front lines, but certainly a beautiful place to create.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to like that type of thing, because at CIA we have a student group that was formed when Katrina hit by Cleveland students that wanted to go down and help out with Katrina, and they've been doing it ever since. This year they actually are going to Homa, but because of Ida. But something I have found through talking to people who are less connected with Louisiana is like they're so unfamiliar with anything that happens where we live environmentally, that like sometimes it takes like bringing them to like front lines type locations to expose them to what this really means and the gravity of the situation. And obviously this is less of a focus on Louisiana artists, so this doesn't directly contribute to like what the conversation y'all were talking about was, but I think that like there could be pros and cons too for like, I don't know, it's like weird living so far from Louisiana, because like up here like the awareness level of anything is so low, and yet they directly impact our environment so much more than they think. And so like before this job I was the watershed coordinator at a park system here, because they started a watershed stewardship center, and it was very interesting on a lot of levels. In a positive sphere, they had done so much more work. I think the news of it had started to trickle upward and people were doing stuff, and that's great. But like one time I was in a talk, and the dude giving the talk, it was wild conference, because the first dude giving the talk was apparently working for, I think he was a newer employee. I don't think he was there when this happened, but he was one of the employees for like some company that was in some way involved with like the massive levee failure during Katrina. And they still had to talk about it in the conference to like save face. And I was sitting there listening, but they were talking around it a lot. So I was sitting there like, this is really weird. What are y'all talking about? And I finally put together, like, I think you have something to do with Katrina, the way like they were talking about it. Like they kept saying, you know, the hurricanes in Louisiana, and I'm like, what are we
Oh
doing?
my
What are we
gosh.
saying? And then finally his talk ends, and the very next lady that goes up is an activist in Ohio trying to take down every single dam for the same reason that we talk about needing like new soil flow down in South Louisiana. So she followed up being like, yeah, that's stupid anyway. And went on like an hour-long talk about how, because they were like pro building more. And it was like weird, but I guess all it made me think of is like, I think there are people, I don't know, outside of Louisiana who are pretty, like, we're in an interesting time for people being kind of gung-ho and receptive to ideas like this. But I think that like sometimes it's surprising to me how polarized it is, who knows and who doesn't. It's like the people who are really interested in this topic in general will sometimes find out about something. And sometimes you go to the weirdest talk ever and you're like, what are we saying? Because this guy I don't think probably even really
Like he
knew what
felt
he
like
was.
on another planet.
Yeah. And I know this doesn't like directly contribute to the like, how are we, you know, incorporating people of our own community into the arts and stuff, but I guess what I was kind of leading to is I wonder if there is a way, although I don't know really how, to create kind of like a cultural exchange of information between places outside of Louisiana and within Louisiana, like maybe somehow connecting artists that are Louisiana artists to people who are artists like on the outside to like talk to each other. Yeah, but yeah, because like that's kind of what this program ends up doing. Like it wasn't designed for that. It was originally just going down for hurricane relief, but it's gone on so long it evolved to like they do essentially like a 2-month-long class on everything that went wrong during Katrina, things that are like politics around hurricanes and how weird they get, a lot of the environmental impact of them, and then they create presentations, and some of them create creative projects like off of this experience. And there have been some kind of interesting things that have come out of that because they really don't know. So like teaching this to like a 20-year-old is so impactful on their brain because they're so in tune with like a lot of, you know, in college is the era for like, I want to go out and do something crazy and like impact the world in a big way. So like it's been very interesting to see people who like, I guess I generally can think of as a little unaware, all of a sudden be like hit with the gravity of like the reality of Hurricane Katrina in such an in-depth way. So I don't know, I guess like I know that's an incomplete thought, but I think it would be cool to maybe try to find ways to bring two different perspectives together, because I think that that could help honestly in like a long run way with future like awareness and like maybe funding for more things where we live from outside sources. So that's a general thought, but yeah.
Some of what you said, Therese, also I think supports what Maida was saying, that, you know, to have a residency where it would be a very different thing if you had an artist from another part of the country who was just educating themselves about all these issues for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
you would get something very different out of that than from a local artist who has lived with the situation for much of their life, and they already understand the situation, that now that they just need the space to do something creative
Yeah.
that responds to that, and speaks to people, that communicates the situation in a way that only their art can.
It does seem like a lot of times artists that come here from elsewhere and maybe in other communities that have more funding or they're established, they get more recognition than the people who are living that experience.
Yeah, we had an experience in Lafayette when I was living there of somebody with a big reputation from Los Angeles come and produce a musical about cultural Louisiana, and I went to a talk that she gave before the performance, where she talked about the importance of doing your homework and how much homework she had done, and then the performance happened, and I've almost never seen Herman Fuselier write a negative review of anything, but he really let her have it. It was not good.
I was
So
asked to
curious.
comment on something similar, and I responded, just pointing out some inaccuracies, and they just blew off. I think they had the instead of being Vietnamese or Cambodian in Plaquemines Parish, they were saying it was this Japanese community. I said, all you got to do is change that to Vietnamese, and
Yeah.
that's pretty darn easy to fix. They totally blew that off. They weren't at all concerned about accuracy or.
Wow.
That was details. That was not this artistic spirit. I was totally bummed.
That's puzzling. And
Yeah, I mean, and for some reason that, saying that there's a Japanese community in Plaquemines Parish really ticked me off. It's like, come on, y'all, do a little bit of
Yeah.
come on.
Just a little research. That's all it takes.
Or accept the feedback. I mean, I was fact checking for them. I was like, I can tell you there are no Japanese communities in Plaquemines Parish.
Yeah.
New Orleans, yes, but not Plaquemines Parish.
Right.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of these musicians and bands, these eco musicians getting to play festivals. I know that sometimes that's not always possible because a lot of our big festivals are sponsored by oil and gas companies, but I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe Earth Days or something like that. Because you could interact with the material, maybe with a booth beside the band or something like that. I don't know if that's already done. I'm just kind of talking out of my head right now, but
a good point.
But the exposure is meant to be on like the artist as much as the environmentalism, correct? So
I just wonder, has anyone here been to the Voice of the Wetlands Festival?
no.
Treasure from Homa, did you grow up there going to that?
I think I did a long time ago, but yeah.
Uh-huh. Do you remember anything from it? Because it seems like it's kind of along the lines of what Jamie was just talking about, or it could have been. I mean, when I went to one of them, and I didn't see that much about the wetlands at the festival. I mean, this was several years into it. It's just a few years ago, so it had already been around for many years. So
yeah, I couldn't tell you as far as like remembering what happened at which festival I went to be real, because my dad's a big fan of hitting every single one of them, and I think some of them blend in my brain.
Well, good for him.
Yeah, I will say I do remember, and I know this one is, to my knowledge, I think it's over now. I don't remember if this was pandemic related or if this was pre, but there was La Fête de Ecologie for a while that did kind of merge a little bit more of those topics. Like I went to that a lot as a kid, and they had a lot of like, I mean, they had a lot of just cultural events there, but they also had a lot of like science education happening at the same festival. So you were literally merging the two, which I think is awesome, because then you get like those two halves. Like you have like these, and I was a kid going to them, so I was into the hands-on like
That's
learning parts, which was
Was
really
that near
fun. And
Homa?
yeah, they had like scientists there and stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I don't know like the details of what happened with that, but I believe that ended for some reason. But I do think that leaving kind of leaves a little bit of a hole for something that we did really need. So I would love to see something like that come back, to yeah, maybe merge like that arts and sciences again.
That what Rougarou was kind of I mean, I'm thinking of Rougarou,
Oh yeah.
Rougarou Fest. I know that they had a storytelling stage, and it took place in Homa. I'm not sure for how many years it's been going on, but that was connected to the Wetlands Discovery Center down there.
Mhm.
And like I went down there, and I think that I might have caught I saw some great stories on the stage, but then I don't know if I caught it at like an off time where the presentations were not as populated as like different areas of the festival. So, you know, it had me wondering, because obviously we're trying to figure this out, like how do you get people excited to listen, to sit and listen to the presentations when like I that's like why I went down there, you know. But I don't know what it was like the rest of the weekend. I mean, I don't know if Maida or anyone else, if you know how like the
Well, when did you go? How recently did
it
you
was like it was this past year, and I
go?
think it was on the last Sunday.
Yeah, well, Sunday's all, I'm a little bit
It was
more familiar with that one.
certainly a slower day.
Yeah, well, some like Baton Rouge, Sunday afternoon is the big day for, you know, that's when the highest attendance will be, but not in Homa. You know, Saturday is their
Right.
big attendance. I think there's some setup issues with the way they have that, because there's no place to sit, or it's you're standing on the concrete, and
It was the sun.
yeah, and the sun, you know, so a lot of that can make a difference between somebody sitting there for 45 minutes and listening to a whole session or moving
Yeah.
on, you know?
Like if it was a tent or something
Oh,
instead.
yeah, and I don't know why we gave him that feedback last year, and I don't know, it didn't happen. You know, there were no changes. And I don't actually know why they didn't address that. But on the other hand, they are live streaming on Facebook the entire stage for 2 days.
That's good to get a broader reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, so they have all those recordings too. So
is that just on Facebook?
Rougarou does really well, but I think the narrative stage needs work.
Well, I was very excited to be there, and so I was just like wishing there were more people for those sessions, but I also knew that the time of day that I went, and I was curious because I hadn't seen it at multiple days.
It seems like we could have as a future speaker, either for this group or for the larger group, someone who's from one of those festivals to talk more about that, or a panel for representatives from 2 or 3 festivals. I mean, I'd certainly be curious to hear from Tab Benoit, for example, about his experience with Voice of the Wetlands and what kind of, you know, things he's learned about doing activism the way he's done it.
Yeah, I can understand why these festivals come and go, because for one thing, they're a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
You know, and so people get burned out, and also they're so expensive to produce. But the Rougarou is actually the primary fundraiser for the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center. So they are very motivated
Yeah.
to make this. And I saw him at a meeting today. And yesterday it was announced that the Rougarou is one of the top 20 festivals in the cultural festivals program for US travel, or there's some kind of or organization that does these. And
Wow.
he's in the top 20, and in his category is Burning Man.
Wow.
Wow.
Is he right above or below Burning Man? Just kidding.
But it's
It's
all
in a
based
class
on
beyond.
vote. So he's trying to get everybody to vote every day as many times, so
I see.
it's completely on it's a popularity contest.
That's how those things work. You got to get people voting.
Yeah. So I thought that was really cute, but he in the same category as Burning Man. But I think, was it USA Today last year? He was that Southern magazine. I'm blanking on the name of it. The big
Southern Living.
Southern Living, yes, of course.
That's Southern magazine, no.
That's Southern. And last year they were the #1 festival in the South. It's pretty amazing what he's done in only about 10 years. I think it's only 10 years old or something like that.
Wow.
But I do think the narrative stage needs work. He's definitely doing a lot right.
Yeah.
God love anybody that's willing to stick with producing festivals for any length of time. I did it years ago, and it's kind of like, oh wow, I do not want to do that again.
That's a lot.
It
It is a great example of that potential for cultural exchange. Like, I think that's the term you used, Therese, but if there are other environmental festivals that our local musicians could go and or even not just environmental, but at a place like Burning Man, where, well, I don't know. No. I mean, I'm sure there are people that care about the environment there, but there's also probably a lot of rich people flying their private planes to go to Burning Man. But maybe they have money to fund
maybe
the artists. So I feel like festivals are a great way.
Oh no, they're fabulous. I just don't want to produce them.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, there could be a way to
let me share with y'all what BCC is already doing connected to festivals, and not all of them are festivals, but what we call the culture and climate conversations. And that it was conceived of originally as primarily festivals, where we basically fund a narrative stage session. And the Rougarou was one of those. And we've had 5, and the 6th one is in April. But some ended up being libraries, and Mona Lisa did one at Dillard in New Orleans.
I went to that one.
At different size audiences, and some of them were just more challenging than others, and others, why we wanted to go with festivals, it's a built-in audience, as assuming it's produced well, and it's better to add a narrative stage session to a festival that already has a narrative stage than to try to get somebody to do it for the first time. So we're getting funding for more of these. And one of the things we want to do is be a little bit more strategic about the venue, the audience, to make sure we're actually having impact and not just giving out money to festivals, because the money had to be spent for the tradition bearers and the moderators. So so that's more tradition bearer oriented than necessarily musicians or other types of artists. But if y'all have any thoughts about that, because we haven't signed the paperwork yet for the additional funding.
Have you talked to Festivals à Cajun about their atelier, their narrative
They
stage?
declined us.
They did.
It was not music.
Well, what I'm saying is, with all the musical examples I presented today, several of those artists have performed at Festivals à Cajun.
Yeah, and maybe if we specify that it's going to be they may have done it if it was music, but
at the time it wasn't a prepared musical presentation.
yeah, that you know, Pud Sharp organizes that stage along with, is it Herman? Herman and him do that?
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know who.
They
Yeah.
submitted some things that suggested some things that were not music oriented, and Barry and Pat declined all of them. They said, no, y'all aren't doing that as part of the festival. So
How long ago was that made?
In the fall.
Oh, just this year, last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if we say, you know, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because what I could do is go back to PUD and say, okay, what if you build on basically your, you know, have a narrative stage that is about the songs, that either the writers, but have the theme be about eco musicians from
Right.
Creole.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help
interested
you.
in
Like,
Cajun Creole.
yeah, I'd be happy to help you write a little proposal about that.
Well, most of the time it's just a conversation between me and Pud, but
Yeah.
this is really productive. So,
something else comes to mind. I don't know how much time or preparation is needed for those. I mean, certainly some, but on April 6th, the Children's Museum is putting on Mudfest. And this is our like big, you know, big education event that is taking place like on the grounds outside of the museum. And it's the third year, and it's basically like a giant pile of dirt that gets delivered, and we have educational programs that are all related. It's like a STEM related, environmental education, art activities. And then this year they really wanted to make it a lot bigger. We have some sponsorship, we have a stage. And so I myself and my supervisor are like in charge of booking who's on the stage. And you know, that's been the conversation, wanting or trying to you know, consider storytellers or tradition bearers, or, you know, mud is a very diverse topic, but any sort of like ecological perspective based in South Louisiana. I mean, I know like the Homa have origin stories of the crawfish in the mud and things like that, you know. But
Greyhawk Perkins could probably do
yes, Greyhawk is on my list to reach out to, top of my list, and he's a friend of the museum. But yeah, I just didn't know if that was like within a time frame to consider one of these.
I'm hoping it. I think we'll probably have the paperwork signed by then. But one of the challenges is, how do we roll this out? You know, like last year with the NEA funds, we had a deadline we had to do things in, so we gave people all fall and into the spring a little bit.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, some of them were too rushed. But y'all already have y'all would not be a freestanding narrative stage, and so we'd be plugging into an existing framework that has publicity and, you know, audience. You have an audience. It's not a, you know, because like Mona Lisa's, I think from the sounds of it, everybody that's been there, said it was excellent. But I think it was announced like 2 weeks before it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So how does, that's not the ideal situation, but Lauren, I'm really glad you mentioned this. And Mark, I want to follow up with you about festivals of Cajun and Creole. Because I think we need to be pickier about what we agree to do.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those events,
I mean, it's a different, it's a young audience age group, but it's also the intergenerational side of it. And it's like the mud and all of the messy plays on one side of this pathway. And then they're having like, our cafe is Acorn. They're having food and like drinks and like, the entertainment stage. We're in the process of like trying to fill the time slots there, but obviously we want it to be like to be enriching. And so,
the purpose of the climate and culture conversations is for tradition bearers to be able to share with the general public and not just the BCC network,
right,
about how the ecological changes are affecting their culture.
Mm-hmm.
So Lauren, be thinking about like Greyhawk in the mud, that makes sense, but whether or not that would be the session we need to fund.
But even so, I mean, like climate change specifically is part of our educational mission. Sustainability is one of our impact areas, but the term is imperfect. Like environmental education really is what it should be called. And we have all these programs like Living with Water and the focus for this event especially, and we have all these community partners that like the perspective is to push the like environmental effects, not only of climate change, but just like the power of water in the place that we live. And like we have a lot of that like STEM representation, but I've been trying to, I mean, we also need to have like the cultural side of things as well, because it's all intertwined, and the team is very much on board with that. So we're just in the process of finding out who all that will be on the day. And then like if it's not enough time, because we're kind of like we're making plans for this new bigger festival, but it all is happening. And then there's always next year too, but yeah.
Well, and I think we have 2 years to spend the money from this foundation when we finally sign it.
We also have Family Folk Life Day in October, which is an event that we've been trying to grow. But the thing about Mudfest is that it being held outside of the museum grounds is that like there's a ticketed area for the mud, but the area with the stage and the drinks and stuff, like they're not as concerned about that. So you could be in the park and just come and witness whoever is on the stage, so that even goes beyond just our museum audience. But anyway, enough about that.
Let's talk. And if y'all have other suggestions, but I think, last time we said, oh, well, if you could be doing something in the library, but the library doesn't necessarily, the promotion of it isn't anywhere near what a festival does.
And it relies a lot on regular users, I think, who like anticipate the certain times to go.
Mhm.
The Frog
was some-
Festival started a
On the
culture.
other hand, we're not in a position to help somebody put on their first ever narrative stage if they don't
Right.
know what that is.
Yeah.
We
Right.
don't have the resources to go there with them, you know.
Also,
So actually, a library session would probably be more impactful than a festival that's never tried to do this before. Like for one suggested a music fest that had no, you know, it was basically a good fun time type of festival. It's like, well, we need a little bit of thoughtfulness, you know, not just
Some of the
going,
listeners
you know.
present.
Yeah, because it reminds me, this is going to sound offbeat, probably, but I was involved in the Olympics that happened in Atlanta, that South Arts wanted to have a cultural component at the Olympics, and we were all excited, and everybody, you know, put so much work into it. And basically we learned that sports fans don't give a hoot about culture.
that's not why they're there.
They
No
walked right
crossover at
past,
all.
and it's like they didn't even pause walking in front of a stage, you know, on the way to whatever, you know, whatever sporting event. And so after that, when it went to Utah, I think it was, like everybody, you know, like that was completely rethought, is do not try to really do a cultural component at the Olympics. It's the wrong audience. You're just
Yeah.
targeting the wrong audience.